It just got real for the Minnesota Wild as a recent Athletic article reveals all on the Marco Rossi situation, including some very interesting comments as to what he had to say about John Hynes and how Rossi was very disappointed. We got to dive into all the latest on the Marco Rossi situation, and also Gustav Nyquist saying that he wants to come back to the Minnesota Wild, and a huge, amazing update on Marc Andre Fleury, who is maybe not fully retired yet. We got to dive into all of this great stuff coming up on this episode of Wild Digest. But guys, before we get into it, got to remind you, you guys hit subscribe like crazy on that last video. Now we are so close to 500 subscribers, and still 90% of you watching these videos haven't hit that button. And we got wild content coming all off season long for free, and the subscribe button's also free if you want to stay up to date. Kirk, let's start with some light news, because I know some fans are not going to want to get into Nyquist and maybe even Rossi too, but I want to start with this really cool thing. And Marc Andre Fleury, he's going to join Team Canada at the World Hockey Championships. This is his first World Championships. He'll be reunited with Sidney Crosby. We also had this quote from him, said, "I went home and the kids were crazy, so I said, gotta keep playing." What are your thoughts on this, Kirk? I mean, I came to terms with never seeing Marc Andre Fleury play again, but to get this is just such a nice bonus.
Yeah, I think it's a real textbook way to end it off. A bit more Flurry in the offseason for Wild fans. Even though he's on Team Canada, you may not be cheering for Canada over the States, but it's always going to be good to see him. Once again, especially with Sidney Crosby, just seeing him back on the ice one final time, kind of a cherry on top of his career. And that being his first World Champion appearance really just kind of makes it a perfect way to end it. And, maybe he decides he's not going to retire yet, but the odds are slim for kind of that outcome, but it'll be cool to see regardless.
Yeah, I think very slim for that outcome. But, regardless, like you said, it is really cool to see. And so, again, he's going up against Team USA. They're going to play games against each other probably. It is what it is, but leave some love for Fleury. Just wanted to start the video on that really nice positive note, as we're going to get into something maybe a little more controversial here, Kirk, and that has to do with our boy Gustav Nyquist. There was a very interesting quote that came out from their pressers and all this stuff, and here's what he had to say. He said, there was a tough play. Yeah, that's one way to describe it. Sorry to relive this, everyone, but he said, he couldn't see through Vegas' Barbashev at the time. It's a frustrating year overall, but he would absolutely like to re-sign in Minnesota if it works out. Look, if fans had a say, Kirk, I think he would have been laughed out of the room. I don't have anything against Gustav Nyquist as a person. I just don't think it's going to work out in Minnesota. That's my take. What do you think? I mean, 35 years old, went from a career year 75 points last year to an abysmal 28 points in 79 games this year, was a negative impact in the playoffs. I say we got to move on from him, but I do find it very interesting that he did have that to say in the first place.
Yeah, he had a very good last year with the Nashville Predators, and we saw the drop-off that team had, going from a pretty decent team to now completely terrible, missing the playoffs by quite a bit. And seeing him have that drop-off this year really just set us off on the wrong foot to start off when we traded for him. I do think that if he was in the right position, right age, right lines, it would have to be perfect. I would be okay with re-signing him, taking all that stuff out the window. However, right now, I don't think the Wild are in the spot to have a guy like Gustav Nyquist still on the roster. They need more depth, and getting an older guy like Gustav Nyquist who's here, not having the right line pairings, it's really just not going to make this team any better. It's not going to make this goal get reversed and actually count. It's not going to be in the exact way we want it, and I think by that means we have to just let Gustav walk. And if is a dire need for a winger, a veteran winger, then maybe I say Gustav Nyquist can come back. But right now, it just doesn't seem like the right time or place for it.
No, look, Gustav Nyquist at this point is very much a theoretical point getter. And I think that's kind of what it is, right? You see that 75 points and you see the career history of being like over an 82 game sample. Like, he's been like a near 20 goal guy for a long time. He's been injured a bit, but like this year was a drastic downturn, and he didn't look fleet foot. So I don't know. Leave us your thoughts on Nyquist. I got a funny feeling I know how those comments are going to go, but look, regardless, he tried. I don't think he'll come back, but, I wish him the best, whether it's in Minnesota or somewhere else. Still, it's tough to get over that play. But you know what? We got to move on to someone else, Kirk. And Marco Rossi has been, I don't know, he's probably been the talk of the offseason so far. I mean, we're talking about Kaprizov signing his extension next year or whatever, but when it comes to Rossi, there have been so many question marks for so long at this point now. Like, we're pushing a year of just like, oh, will he stay? Will he go? And there were a lot of quotes from this recent Athletic article that will be linked down below as always. And we got to just dive into some of them. I'm going to start with this one here. In the article from Michael Russo and Joe Smith, they said this. Rossi, 23, said he was very disappointed That's a quote by his usage, and had an honest, quote, man-like exit meeting with head coach John Hynes on Sunday. Hynes and Wild president of hockey operations, Angie and Bill Guerin, are scheduled to talk to the media on Tuesday. So that is coming tomorrow, so keep an eye on that. We'll be talking about that, I'm sure. But in the meantime, all we can look at is this quote. I mean, look, no surprise that Rossi himself would be not happy, Kirk. I mean, look, he said, I've shown all year long how good I am and going, from 40 points to 60 points this year. I've got no doubt. I'm for sure a top 6 guy. There's a lot of ways we can take this. To me, this just got real. Like, I know I've kind of been like, look, I think we're going to extend him. And look, I know his name's in the trade block, but as the days go by, man, I don't know. The way some people are talking about him, we might get into another quote in just a second. I'm starting to have some doubt seeded into me. Maybe more than there always was some, but maybe more than ever before.
Yeah, these quotes from Marco Rossi, to me, are a bit concerning. We knew he was going to be along the lines of saying something like this. He verbally said that he was unhappy about his minutes in the playoffs, but that all stems down to experience. That stems to having the ability of, being an absolute unit in the playoffs. And that is just not Marco Rossi. 5'9", smaller guy, had a great 82-game full season in the regular season with 60 points, second on the team. But he's not yet that playoff player that we know. And we know in the playoffs, you have to have been able to prove it before to be given a spot, That's just something that Rossi hasn't had the opportunity to yet due to his age. But I see that coming very, very soon. I see him being easily a second-line center, as he says, on this team. I know Freddie Gaudreau is there and his better faceoffs, a bit better defense, but you have to think that Marco Rossi, he's going to bring that depth scoring with whoever he's paired with. And when the Wild are looking to add in this offseason, hopefully he's going to be a part of the additions for other players, and hopefully don't see him elsewhere. But this comment really has me on the edge, like you, Josh, as well, that this doesn't seem or sound too good, at least from Marco Rossi. But I think all we can hope is that meeting with John Hynes went very well, and that they vocalized that they want him on this team and be able to turn him into an elite superstar, in addition of Boldy, Kaprizov, and Eriksson Ek.
And I think it's very possible. Like, again, you look at the point production, and look, he knows. Like, he's like, I know what I am, and I know I'm good. And we know he's good. And like you said, it's about the experience a lot of the time in the playoffs, for sure. And I think maybe he understands, but again, being disappointed, that's very fair as well. But look, man, like, I'm hearing more and more talk about offer sheets and stuff, too. I don't want to get into that. That might be its own video as well, but with more and more talk about offer sheet after the Holloway and Broberg situation last year, you have to wonder if a team will swoop in and offer him 7 years by $8 million. Will the Wild even want to match that? There's a lot of questions coming up, but there's one final quote I wanted to get into here, and it comes from Matt Zuccarello, and I want to get your thoughts on it and all the fans' thoughts in the comments down below. This is probably nothing. It's probably us just reading too much into it, but he said he's got some real bright years talking about Rossi coming in, and he's going to be a huge part of this team or whatever team he's going to be on in the future. He's going to have a really good career. And look, this is just a normal comment. This is probably me thinking too much about this. However, when that's on your mind as a player, when you're talking about Rossi, I know you can't talk about ongoing negotiations, this kind of stuff. The fact that this is even on his mind, to me, again, it's not like a red flag or a signal to anything. It's just like, I don't know. It just adds to that level of uncertainty. What about you? Am I thinking too much into this?
No, I get the idea. I really do understand that, when we're looking at this and when his name is in the media for all of this stuff, it certainly seems like it's a very big focal point. But when we're looking at Matt Zuccarello as what he's been saying about Marco Rossi, he said he's going to have a good career. You got to assume that he's talking about his entire career. And we know nowadays it's not like a player is going to be in one spot his entire career. It's just not the game anymore. So I do think and I hope at least that's what Zuccarello is kind of implying, his entire career. He'll be a very solid, consistent over his time. But, once again, it really has that on the top of my mind just because Marco Rossi's name is in every single possible, trade block, trade rumor, trade report from this offseason so far. And now having this quote coming out from him in the media exit, it just kind of, puts me on edge a bit. I hate to say it, but it really does.
Yeah, and we're reading the comments too. I think a lot of people are saying, look, I mean, the writing might be on the wall. From everything we're reading, it sounds like he might be gone. I mean, there seems to be a disagreement. Rossi said, look, at this point, all he can do is let his agent do the work. I think they've established a number. My guess is somewhere around 7.5% of the cap. Don't know where the Wild camp is, but we'll just have to wait and see. Let us know how you feel about these recent comments, because to us, I think it just got a little more real than it ever was before. But look, that'll do it for this episode of Wild Digest. And just a reminder, on your way out, if you're part of that 90% watching this video, that's hundreds of you that are not subscribed. Hit the free button down below. We're pushing for 1,000 very soon, but 500 is so close. Thank you all so much for the support. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Kirk Day. We'll catch you in the next one.